Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of RPG Radio. Thank you for tuning in. Today's episode is going to be focused on another barbarian build that is quite a bit more difficult than the previous iterations on this channel, but still super fun and rewarding to play. So this is the Ancients build. This is going to be focused a lot on charge, Call of the Ancients, and leaping around in the background as well. Now I'm going to set your expectations real early here. This build is not going to be amazing unless you have a lot of the legendary aspects geared up, ready to go, and you're probably decent level with his sacred or ancestral gear. Right now we're looking at the early game version of this build, and I will be honest with you, killing bosses is nearly... That's not impossible, but it is definitely patience destroying. So if you do not like to sit and fight for a little bit, you're going to have some trouble leveling up this build unless you're going to, put all the effort into grinding out some other build and then switching at, I'd say, 60 or 70. That being said, I did learn plenty about playing this way, and it did feel at least pretty good at the outset, even if it did wear a little bit on the old patience meter later on. But let's talk about the abilities, because those are going to be everything that make this kit work, and there are a couple of legendary aspects that you'll want to get early on that you can farm out of dungeons that make this build deal damage in the early game. Now, we are doing abilities in the order of top to bottom, not in level of importance. So, the first ability on our tree is going to be a Lunging Strike. Lunging Strike is... I'm not going to say it's the greatest of the basic skills that we have access to, and I really wish I could use a bash, but this build is going to focus on the use of polearms to make a lot of use out of lucky hit. So the unfortunate truth is that bash requires a bludgeoning weapon, and frenzy requires dual wielding, and the cleave requires anything. So it's either cleave or it's lunging strike, and between the two of them, cleave, we don't want bleeding damage in this build. So lunging strike ultimately offers mobility, and it offers a potential berserking for 1.5 seconds with its upgrade. But ultimately, you just want to put enough points into lunging strike to get you further down the tree to upheaval quicker. And again, it works really well with a polearm, but you shouldn't be relying on this for damage. Ultimately, it's just for fury generation, it is for mobility, and that is going to be it. The more that I end up playing the barbarian, even though I love every single build that I play with it, and I feel like it's more fun than some of the other stuff in the game, I do see a lot of really kind of railroaded, built-in, goofy stuff from the dev team for this class, and it doesn't feel very good. I think that they overshot what was going to be a balanced decision for the barbarian, and they decided that since it can have potentially 4 different types of weapons, that they needed to really nerf a whole bunch of other things going on in the kits, and that really doesn't feel great. So I'm hoping with time this really changes for the barbarian, especially being able to use something like axes on either your slashing or your bludgeoning weapon slot would be a fantastic change, I think, to make the builds a bit more free. Because right now, you really get kind of pigeonholed. But I'm not going to complain. I already love the barbarian. It's the only class in Diablo 4 I truly enjoy. So let's talk more about what we're actually doing here. If I didn't mention it previously, the upgrades for your lunging strike are the enhanced lunging strike, which heals you for 2% of your max health, and your combat lunging strike, which means that with crits you are going to get berserking for 1.5 seconds. It's there. It's not something that you should be banking on to get berserking with, but why not spend the point? It's not like it's really necessary for anything else going on. Further down the tree, though, in our core skill slot, we are working for Upheaval. Upheaval, you're going to want to max that out rather soon, because this one is going to be all of your damage pretty early on in the game. At least until you can get to the point where you are using both Charge, Leap, and Call of the Ancients in unison. But at least for the time being, Upheaval is your core skill. It has a huge Fury cost, and your enhanced Upheaval gets a chance to stun all enemies' damages for 2.5 seconds. Furious Upheaval is the one we're taking instead of Violent Upheaval. It's really gonna go back and forth on that. I think as the build develops, we may go back to Violent Upheaval for the Berserking, but at least for now, Furious Upheaval is going to give you stacking damage 5% up to 50% every time that you deal direct damage to an enemy with a skill that is not Upheaval. So that means later on when we get our legendary charge upgrade, the charge that we do is going to have the ability to stack this up a lot quicker, because all of the ancients that come out with our charge count as dealing direct damage with an ability that isn't Upheaval. Same thing works with Call of the Ancients. So there's going to be quite a few windows where you can get the stacks up on Upheaval pretty quick, and you can start laying down the damage. The only unfortunate part about Upheaval is that the Fury cost on it is absolutely immense, and I really wish I could use Hammer of the Ancients instead, but there is another legendary aspect built into this kit that is going to be necessary for summoning more Ancients, and that is purely stipulated as Leap, Upheaval, or Whirlwind. And I don't think I need to tell anybody else that I will never, ever pick Whirlwind, so this is what we've got. That's just to correlate to the Ancients that get summoned from Call of the Ancients. Each of them do either a Leap, an Upheaval, or a Whirlwind, and there you have it. I mean, that's just kind of how they dictated that legendary aspect is going to work, which is a little bit sad, you know, but I guess it maybe could have been too good for Hammer of the Ancients. Regardless, that's the reason that we need Upheaval the way that it is, and why it has to be part of this kit. You're also going to want to take pressure points at this tier, and this is going to give you a lucky hit chance to get your core skills to deal vulnerable to enemies that they hit for 2 seconds. Lucky hit is a big mechanic of this build, and having it high up with both polearms and having lots of opportunities to get lucky hit procs is good. So remember, pick that passive up first off, and you're also going to want Endless Fury at this tier, because this means your basic skills are going to generate 15% more fury when using two-handed weapons, which, again, I don't think I need to tell anybody, but two-handed weapons are just better all around when it comes to dealing big damage. Dual wielding is great for frenzy and stuff like that, but as it stands right now, always two-hand for damage. The next tier, we're going to be picking up our first defensive skill, or only defensive skill actually, and that is Iron Skin. I've been trying to make Iron Skin work in a build for a long ass time, and I just haven't been able to find a slot for it. So this build is going to have that happen. Iron Skin is going to give you a barrier that absorbs 50% of your missing life for 5 seconds, and the enhanced Iron Skin is going to increase that by your maximum life, by a percentage of your maximum life. Tactical Iron Skin is going to heal you for 10% of the barrier's original amount as life per second. So this is not only going to be a heal and a barrier button, but later on we'll pick up a legendary aspect that makes you completely unstoppable while you have Iron Skin going. Couple that with another legendary aspect that will be increasing our damage while we've got a barrier on, and you can see that Iron Skin is going to ultimately be pulling a lot of the weight in this build, at least for passive usability. I still think it's going to take a long time to build up to that point, which is a little bit sad, but there is a kind of fun Malignant Heart interaction this season for Iron Skin 2. So since Iron Skin is a defensive ability, that means that one of the Brutal Hearts, the one that lets you store up enemy damage, you hit your Iron Skin and you send it out in a shockwave of fire damage. It is really cool. It doesn't necessarily do a whole bunch of damage, but at least it gives you some damage on top of a button that ultimately was not doing any damage prior to that point. Further on down the tier, we've got our Brawling skills. This is going to be a really important tier for this class, mainly because Charge and the legendary aspect that goes along with it are going to be dealing most of the easy burst damage. So the Ancestral Charge legendary aspect is what you're going to want, and you'll equip that to either of your two-handed weapons to get the double damage bonus from it. But when you equip that, you are going to have 4 Ancients that also charge with you every time that you hit that button, and then they will deal damage, like I said, increasing your upheaval procs from earlier, but they also deal a pretty gross amount of damage, and they help reduce the cooldown of your charge too. So that big fan of barbarians coming at your enemy, bashing them into a wall and stunning them, counts to reduce the cooldown of charge by using the power charge upgrade. So you'll take that after you get enhanced charge, but ultimately the power charge is what you want, because that's going to reduce the cooldown, allow you to charge more often, and really take care of those small mobs. Even elites take a lot more damage than bosses will from charge, but that's only because bosses cannot be moved around, they can't be stunned, they can't really be CC'd, they can only be staggered, and power charge, charge itself is really only dealing damage when it can push people into terrain. That's what enhanced charge does. Anyway, enemies who get knocked back into terrain take 60% damage, and they're stunned for 3 seconds. You'll also pick up the Brawlers aspect for this build. Brawlers is the one that lets your kick or charge explode enemies if they die within 2 seconds of getting hit by the charge or the kick. In this case, charge, and everybody getting bashed around by the charge has a really, really good chance to explode and increase that chain reaction of explosions, killing lots and lots of enemies, as you can see, just pounding them into the wall there. We also want to pick up Leap. Leap is a very, very, very good Fury generator, and that's because Power Leap gives you 40 Fury every time that you hop around, which is the cost of 1 upheaval. So if you end up running out, all you have to do is hop right on top of someone's head, and your upheaval is charged and ready to go. Enhanced Leap is the most negligible upgrade to any ability in the entire game, and it just means that your cooldown on Leap is going to be reduced by 4 seconds if it doesn't hit anybody. I hate that this is what Leap has as a standard upgrade, and it just sucks. It sucks. The other upgrade for Leap sucks in comparison to Power Leap, but you know, I can't really I can't make developer decisions for them. So yeah, Mighty Leap, really good for the 70% slow, but I don't think Blizzard understands how much 40 Fury is and how good that is as an upgrade. What I really think that they should do is throw out Enhanced Leap altogether, replace it with Power Leap, and then come up with something else to work between Mighty Leap and that 70% slow. So, as it is right now, Leap is incredibly good for Fury generation, and a lot of what it can do in this build is going to be focused on some legendaries further on down the road that increase the damage it can do, but for the time being, it's just a Fury button, it's a mobility button. It's not really used for a whole lot else. It is very, very good at those things though, so don't sleep on it, but for now. Your passives at this tier are going to be the Fury passives, or your Berserking passives. You're going to want Aggressive Resistance, Prolific Fury, and Battle Fervor. Aggressive Resistance is damage reduction while you're Berserking. Prolific Fury is Fury generation while you're Berserking. And Battle Fervor is going to let your Brawling skill whenever it damages at least one enemy, grant you Berserking for 3 seconds. When this build gets late game and we pick up the leap reduction or cooldown reduction for leaping onto enemies, that is going to be a lot of Berserking all the time, which will translate into big damage. We're not going to take anything on the weapon mastery tier, at least not yet. I'm still kind of on the fence about Pit Fighter and Slaying Strike, but for now, don't worry about it. The ultimate skill tier is going to be Call of the Ancients and both of the upgrades for that. Call of the Ancients is, it's an ancient build. If you don't see why you need Call of the Ancients in an ancient build, then you probably shouldn't be playing it. But you have to have Call of the Ancients to make the legendary aspects of Ancestral Echoes work. So if you're not using the Call of the Ancients on your skill bar, you don't get the lucky hit possibility from that legendary aspect. So remember, you have to take it. I don't know why you wouldn't anyway, but still. Call of the Ancients summons your 3 buddies. That is Korlik, Talik, and Modok, the ancient barbarians. They are going to help you out for only 6 seconds. It's a very small period of time, but it's a 50-second cooldown, so you can kind of use this pretty easily. The first upgrade for it is called Prime Call of the Ancients, and that is going to give you 20% bonus attack speed, along with 10% increased damage. Supreme Call of the Ancients is going to let Korlik, which is the leaping double swinging guy, give you 10 fury every time that he damages an enemy with Frenzy. Talik is going to give you a slow anytime that he damages anybody with Whirlwind, and Modok has a 30% chance to stun enemies for 3 seconds using Upheaval. All in all, I really just want this for the Fury generation, because using a lot of Upheaval is tough, but it's easier when Call of the Ancients is active. This is another ability I feel like this got nerfed because of the way that it works with like the Whirlwind and Shout builds. It's unfortunate that it's 6 seconds. If you could get it to like 8, I think it would be perfect. But, you know, here we are. You got to work with what you got. But again, in this build, you'll be able to fire off both Korlik and Modok when you are getting those lucky hits with your leap and your Upheaval, but no Talik, because Whirlwind is just not something that is ever going to be on my action bar. You can also take Heavy-Handed, which is the first passive two-handed ability at the ultimate tier, and while you're using two-handed weapons, you deal 15% increased critical strike damage. That means that using swords in this build is going to be very, very good too, for at least your dual wielding weapons, as you are going to need a hammer for your bludgeoning and a polearm for your slashing. Again, you have to have polearm for that increased lucky hit chance, because we really do want to fire off as many ancients as possible just by leaping around and using our Upheaval to swing all over. Your key passive, the final ability on the tree for this build, is going to be Walking Arsenal. Walking Arsenal, just like the Deathblow build, you're going to have to stack it up, make it work, get that damage for you. But the other good thing about Walking Arsenal is that we'll eventually want to pick up the 100,000 steps, which are the unique boots, which we'll start finding in Tier 3 pretty soon, since we're about to finish off the capstone dungeon for World Tier 2. We can get that unique hopefully on our belt pretty soon. I've got a couple in storage, so we'll probably get those quicker, but regardless, we'll be able to make use of the ground stomp coming off of 100,000 steps with our Walking Arsenal, and that in and of itself is a big CC. It's a big just AoE melee buff, not to mention all the damage that's coming out of Walking Arsenal. And there is another legendary aspect we'll talk about on the late game portion of this build that increases your lucky hit chance once you have all of your Walking Arsenal stacks going. So there's a lot of different components to this build, and it really does suck that I can't show them all to you right away, but powering through the early game, making sure that you level up, get all the points where you need them in this build is very important, so it's not like we can just ignore it. Unless you're the type of person who is just going to spam whirlwind shout build up until you hit level whatever and then respec, I think the early game stuff is still worth it. But anyway, that is going to basically do it for this build, guys. I know that boss took way too long to kill, but let me know what you think. I will see you all next time. Peace out.